It refers. The big, almost human brain, Electro the Robot.
Yeah.
You asked for
Yeah. Everybody want it. You might lose a lot for it. You might get locked for it. You might get shot for it. How bad you want it? How bad you want it? Some niggas see the price, decide they don't need it. Some niggas pay the cost. How bad you want it? How bad you want it? You might lose a lot for it. You might get locked for it. You might get shot for it. How bad you want it? You might lose a life for it. You might lose your friends for it. Get shot in your bins for it. Moving toward it. How bad you really want it? Everybody want it.
Welcome to Capo 2. Bundy here, you there? The papers always provide us with everything that we need championship morning. Because championship morning is a placebo effect for the participants. Oh, you heard what I said. Every championship morning, two teams wake up with an overtly inflated sense of their selves and what they've accomplished as far as fantasy. They wake up thinking that all the moves that they did were perfect. They made the right moves. They said yes when everybody else said no. They zigged when, everyone else zagged. And they get to make their own personal TED Talk speeches in their bathrooms when they're taking shits, in anticipation for their championships, because they've got it all figured out now. It gives people a false sense of what this moment means and what it always becomes, which is a result of a winner and a loser. One of you is going to be wrong by 9 o'clock tonight. We have a very we have a gift today, because all games pretty much at this point seem like they will be settled by the 4 o'clock games. By the 4 o'clock games, we'll know if this thing is completely out of hand or if we have a very interesting fantasy day where it's going to come down to the wire. But you will have a winner and a loser. So that's why the papers are oh so important on a day like this, ladies and gentlemen. Andy is very confident, right? Or at least if Andy's not confident, he projects the image of confidence. He posts up stupid GIFs whenever he retorts with something, where he's trying to make himself come across as like the savvy owner who's got everything figured out and who knows what he's doing and blah, 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 blah. Of course, 2019 was the year that Andy finally grew up and decided to become a fantasy owner. Eric wins in 2020, and now Andy is back here. But let's put Andy's possible victory into its full perspective. If Andy wins today, he wins his second championship. For Andy, that's an immense accomplishment. I mean, he won 2 championships in 3 years. You mean to tell me that Andy won in 2019 and then he came back in 2021? He did it. Yo, Andy's it. Yeah. But if we know anything about history, then we would know that Bundy did it in 2010 and 2012. So Andy, in his apex, in his evolved form, becomes the second coming of Bundy. In your victory, you become the second team to win 2 championships in 3 years. And even then, we ain't shit because neither of us have won it back to back like Jay did. And Eric attempted to do when he found out just how difficult and how unlikely it is to happen. I still say that. I believe we will have a 4-chip winner before we have anyone win back-to-back championships again. Jay won back-to-back, and as time continues to move along, if we could kind of pick on Jay a little bit, as time continues to move along, it starts to look like a bit of a, like that championship was kind of faux a bit, right? Can I sprinkle that all over Jay's corpse? Can I? Yeah, I'm talking to your dad right now, Jay, so I'm asking Andy for permission. But let's get back to Andy. So if you win, right? I did it in 2010 and 2012, and that's not to insert myself into the conversation. That's not to say that I am better than you, because who cares? I did that 11 years ago. Though in my head right now, I'm kind of, thinking of that Jay-Z line from Hovey, baby. You guys are just as old as fuck as I am. You remember when he said it. You got it, I had it, got mad at it, and don't want it no more. Of course, I want the championship, Andy, but your future's my past. I did that before, okay? I don't say it to insert myself into the chip. I say it because we have to have a sense of history here. When we say shit in the chat, or when we think that we're doing something that hasn't been done before. No, you have to be informed that you are following in my footsteps. Now, there's a conversation to be had about what happens after that, because after 2012, I didn't win a chip till 5 years after that. And you laugh at me because it took 5 years, but you were still existing in the very same league where I was able to do that before you were able to get to your first. Now let's move on to Paul. Paul, of course, was the winner of the very first Cop Bowl between these two in 2016, 132-95. Taintswet defeating the then Insuro Marbles Tanaka, 132-99. Paul, if he wins, Paul just wins his second championship. And he deserved, of course, to have a actual shot, in my opinion, last season. He didn't really have a shot. We've already had a conversation about what happened in 2020. We've moved on since then, but the fact remains is that it's just a 0 for Paul. And if he wins today, then he deservingly walks into the 2-chip win circle. But if Paul loses, I think this is where everything gets very interesting, because Andy winning in 2019 means that he won in 2019. So if Andy loses today, that doesn't make Andy a loser at all, because, hey, there's only been one person who's actually did what he did. I don't give a fuck if it was me or if it was Joe. Wait a minute, my dick almost laughed for a second. Did I actually reference Joe, like, hypothetically, even if it wouldn't even happen? Joe, yeah, I'm not even gonna say your name. I'm not even, no, I already said your, I'm not gonna give you any light, Joe. How about that? I'm not gonna give you any light. So, of course, it's, if Andy loses, then, no big deal, right? He just won it 2 seasons ago. But Paul is in this unique position where he becomes a victim of his own success. He becomes the guy who puts together a lot of solid fantasy seasons, but no championships are won as a result. He bears no, his garden bears no fruit. Nothing grows in his garden. Though he has one, it produces nothing. If Paul loses today, he just becomes not necessarily the Buffalo Bills, like I think Jay suggested, but he just loses and it's all for nothing. He had a great season last year. He had a great season this year, and it's still nothing since 2016 if he loses. But if Paul wins, then he merely becomes a team that made it to 2 consecutive championships, which is not the very first time. Jay, of course, made 3 consecutive championships in 2012, 2013, and 2014. more importantly, Jay was 2-1 in those 3 chips. Paul loses today, right? He's 0-2, and he's got the consecutive thing going. If he pops up next year and he wins a chip, who gives a shit, right? This is the point. Let's all bring it back, right? Don't get trapped into the numbers and everything. And listen to me right here, right? Because I'm not Michael Buffer, right? Paul called me Michael Buffer. He said, "Oh, that's what he does." I understand that it's a comment, but let me let you know what this is. I'm not Michael Buffer. I am Shang Tsung, sir. I am an evil sorcerer who needs souls to keep his eternal life, which is essentially a curse, afloat. That's what I do. I sit here and I observe you like a fucking cat. I am not here to introduce you or to bring up your stats as a mark of your accomplishment. I am merely here to say that I see you, I observe you, and I will kill you. And that is a joke now. It's a joke now because you're competing for the championship today. But as I said, these days are placebo effects. For say, one of you is gonna be right. One of you is gonna be right. That's the beauty of this whole thing. And I anticipate a great game. I anticipate a competitive matchup, which is what I wanted last year, and I believe I'm getting now. I do want to express my concerns, however, for Paul's team. This goes without saying, really, but of course it'll be underscored if it happens today. And, if it happens, it's, what I'm about to mention is just something that can either just happen or not happen. So it's not really a prediction. But the obvious danger in what Paul has done all year, and to his credit, it's worked, is playing 3 starters for one team. I love Hydras, you love Hydras, but Paul has been, this is maybe an actual Hydra because it's 3 players on one team. He's got Herbert, he's got Eckler, and he's got Allen. And in this particular week, he's also got Waddle, he's got Gesicki, and he's playing the Dolphins defense. So he's playing 3 players from, 3 slots from 2 different teams. I, of course, have to sit here and tell you that, well, against a good team, that is a gamble. But this is what got him to the dance in the first place. So, of course, I'm not suggesting that Paul should change that. And what I would love even more is if Paul were to listen to this before the 1 o'clock kickoff, and I can give him at least a little, an eye drop of a doubt into his subconscious, especially with with starting the Dolphins, which let's see. So Paul is starting the Dolphins, and fuck me, because here on ESPN I have I'm into the history instead of the actual league. As I look this up, by the way, I do want to mention that souls, right? Souls are a topic that comes up a lot on these recaps. We bring up souls because Jay has, of course, lost his soul to Andy, but he's gotten some of it back. Jay has gotten some of it back because the fact that the last week of the season, of course, Jay defeated Andy. That is not ignored. That counts. That counts for something because he could have lost. In the midst of that, of course, that would have got me into the playoffs. Jay fucked me there, so, who am I to say anything that he's lost his soul when he kept me out of the playoffs in the process? So he gets a little bit of it back because he stood up to Andy, but he hasn't conquered Andy yet, right? He stood up to him. He did, he did, Neo in the Matrix 1. He turns around and he's like, he's beginning to believe. And by the way, the Matrix is, I didn't enjoy the movie. I thought it was weird. Towards the end of the movie when it was like, Neo, can you fly? Of course I can't. Who can fly? My bitch can fly. And now, now she's like pulling me across everywhere. What is she the one now? Like, whatever. But, I'm sure you guys have seen a lot of criticism online because, Lana Wachowski, one of the Wachowski brothers is now trans. So now it's like kind of like, oh, it's like propaganda. Who cares? But we see that Jay has done something, right? He got some of his soul back. And this is what I want to say about souls and why it matters, because Jay would bring up Ed's comeback. That was something that I noticed that he mentioned in the first 2 recaps that he did, you know, and then I might have heard Orlando say it at one point, and they were like, "Oh, Ed's defying what Bundy said about him," and I looked at that and I thought it was real interesting, and that's why I took so much satisfaction in shattering Ed's jaw the final week of the fucking season, nigga. Okay. All that was said just to get to the point that I could just ejaculate on Ed's face and just tell you that it was very satisfying to beat Ed the final week of the season, because Ed, of course, beat me in 2015, right? 2015, and then I win a chip in 2017. Ed could have my soul if things like this, you know, don't happen. If I lose to Ed in the final week of the season, then there's a conversation to be had about, does Ed have my number, you know? And you should always pay attention to the little individual matchups. Eric and Andy have a very interesting thing going on, because Andy just beat Eric last week, and and Eric beat Andy last year en route to the championship to then beat Paul in the championship. So it's very interesting how people sort of somebody's jaw gets shattered this year, and then you come back and then you lose to that very same person. Now, I shattered your fucking jaw, Ed. Left you stiff as a board like Tyrone Woodley last week. So I want to make a mark of that as I was just looking up these stats that I didn't even find. Here's the point about Paul, all right? Fuck all that and fuck whatever he has going on, because I don't even know who the Dolphins are playing. But the point is he's putting a lot of eggs in one basket, and Andy is he's not chopped liver this year. Andy's, of course, one of the top scoring teams in the league. I believe it's this might be a number 1 and a number 2 situation. Let's see. Right, so this season, Rollo Tomassi 1497 and Highlander with 1407. Paul with a bunch of points more than Andy, but Andy's still able to score. So when you put all your eggs in one basket, I kind of look at your team a bit side-eyed. And then there's the Zerloin and the Butker decision that Paul has to make here. And I think these are one of the things that I think Paul's been thinking about, just as he went to bed last night when he brushed his teeth and he looked into the mirror and he was just like, Herbert, fine. Eckler, fine. What am I going to do about Butker? Am I going to start Butker at 425? Sorry, am I going to start Butker at 1? Or am I going to start Zerloin, Legatron, at 425? Is this going to be a close game? Am I going to lose by 6 points? Are 6 points going to be the difference between my 2 healthy kickers? And then the next question may be, why the fuck do I have 2 kickers in the first place? I get it, Butker, I think he got hurt about a week ago, but this is just a thing, man. It's on your bench now. He's on your bench. It's like your bench just stares at you for the chip. You guys just look at each other, and you sort of just have to witness, somebody that you love die. It's like in Apocalypto. You remember that fucking amazing scene when the character's father gets killed right in front of him and he just has to look at him. He's like, son, don't be afraid. And then the guy slits his fucking throat. That's what it's like when it's on the bench. Butker's just going to look at Zerloin, or Zerloin's going to look at Butker. And if it goes down, that close, then that's something for Paul to consider right before the kickoff. As far as Andy, I am going to say that at the end of all this, the back and the forth that I've done, the shitting on this person, the shitting on that person that I've done, I will say, and let me say this, right? It's 11 a.m. here in Toronto, right? Once again, it is not a shitty Drake song. It is a timestamp of when I am saying what I am saying. It is January 2nd, 2022, 11 a.m., 2 hours before kickoff. And I believe that Andy has the advantage in this game. Because of what I just mentioned, Andy has a puncher's chance against Paul. Everyone has a puncher's chance against Paul because Paul is so devoted to the teams that he is devoted to, which is why he's been scoring so many points. It's a successful system. I wouldn't look at this and say Paul's making a blueprint of how to have a successful fantasy season, because I'm not trusting any particular teams. I think this is more about the players than it is about the teams. So like next year, if this happens like with the Bears or something, I don't know. I would question that. I don't know. I just don't like. Yeah, what Paul's doing is very interesting, but I'd like to see how this ends this afternoon. I believe Andy has the advantage because Cooper Kupp has shut me the fuck up, because I have made criticisms of Cooper Kupp in the past, earlier this season, and he, of course, is the number 1 fantasy wide receiver. Now that I've said that, hopefully he twists his fucking ankle en route to a first down in the first quarter, so he does nothing for you. And Andy also has Deebo Samuel, who is number 2, and he's going against Houston. Rashard Penny in there for Andy, which is a bit questionable. And this is the biggest concern, excuse me, if I'm Andy. Back to the defenses. Andy's choosing to go with the Dallas Cowboys against the Cardinals. Now, I don't think that in terms of fantasy IQ, I don't think that Andy is at Paul's level. Only because I assume, and this is of course my assumption, and it's not really an assumption, I think it's just a well-informed observation. Paul seems like he looks at football in particular a lot closer than Andy looks at football. I think Andy, maybe I don't know what sports Andy pays attention to, but I don't take Andy as somebody who's knowledgeable about the actual game, but he's taking a risk, and if it works, it works. The Dallas Cowboys are currently the number 1 ranked defense, and I think that is what's guiding Andy, and that's kind of more to the point. Somebody who doesn't know as much would just go off of ESPN rankings. That's kind of what puts a lot of you into shitty draft situations, because you just do what ESPN tells you to do. ESPN tells you to get the vax every draft. They say, well, you're gonna have to get this vax, and you go, well, whatever. I also want to I don't want to make too much, this is the chip and everything, but I just have to say that I saw a hilarious clip with de Blasio. De Blasio, who I met one time. I didn't meet de Blasio. I saw de Blasio late one night, Upper West Side. It was like 4:00 in the morning, and I see like a tall ass dude in a 3-piece suit with several other people around him, and I was like, all right, this looks like an important person. As he gets closer, I was like, oh shit, that's de Blasio. Guy's like fucking 6'5" or 6, or he's tall as fuck, right? De Blasio was on the news the other day, and he was just I don't know if you guys heard this. He said something like, well, citizens are pretty simple. You tell them they can't go to work unless they get the shot. And this is what it was. He was talking about leadership. I'm sorry. He was like, leadership is all about, people are very simple. So you tell them they can't go to work if they don't get the shot, and then they end up getting the shot. That's not leadership, sir. That's tyranny. That's tyranny, motherfucker. That dude is a tyrant. What are you talking about, sir? It's being that tall. I think his head's in the clouds and he can't think straight. That nigga is out of his fucking mind. But anyway, fantasy tells you guys what to pick, so that's what leads me to determine that you're kind of guided by the numbers of the website. But Andy, nonetheless, whatever. He's going for the Dallas Cowboys, and let's see how that ages, right? Let's see where that goes. But I believe, and I'm not gonna make a prediction here of how many points, though that would be fun, but I don't want to get locked into that because I'll probably be drunk within the next 2 hours or something like that. I see that Andy has Joe Burrow against Kansas City. I do believe that later this afternoon Andy will defeat Rollo Tomassi. I don't think it's going to be by a lot. I think it's going to be pretty close, but I would just question that, and this is what it boils down to, I think. I would question that if the chances of the Chargers having a great game, which Paul needs, Paul can't win this game IMO without one of those explosive Chargers performances where, Herbert throws 3 touchdowns, 2 of which go to Keenan Allen. And, Austin Eckler, he's there getting the yards, and maybe he gets a touchdown or 2. That's the only way this is going to work. That's the first part, at least. Second part is, Are you so confident that Waddle and Gesicki are both going to eat? I like his chances with Ronald Jones. I think that's a good one. But I think advantage goes to Andy because there's only a matter of time before Ezekiel Elliott can keep having these teen performances. I would look over to Ezekiel Elliott, kind of catching passes out of the backfield. I don't like Josh Jacobs, but it's like Andy's passing attack and Joe Burrow against another young quarterback. It's going to be very interesting. It can't lock me in for a victory for Andy, but it could go either way. But at the very least, we have a championship that should live up to what we expect it to be, right? Right? If it is a game that is it's very entertaining, it's very engaging, I'm not gonna lie to you. I'd like to come back and recap the end of the game to see how it goes. If it's really that interesting, if it's not really intriguing, then we'll just walk away from this for all eternity. If it's just a complete one-sided game. But as I said, everything will be decided by about 9 o'clock, which is awesome. But let's not forget what we're dealing with here, fellas. Let me close this whole thing out. I've been talking here for about 20 some odd minutes. We wouldn't want to affect Andy's attention span, which seems to be the equivalent of a fucking of a bottle of peroxide. Andy's attention span is like a 4-year-old. But let's bring it back to the point of what being Thanos is really all about in a league. It's not about ego. It's not about dick measuring. It's about stating the actual fact that where you are about to move your chess piece, my chess piece was there several years ago, and then I moved the piece just a little bit farther. For Andy, I'll liken it to this, right? Andy, who was in Cyril Marble's Tanaka in 2016 when he lost to Paul, will understand this. If you win today, Andy, then it's the equivalent of Serrano's home run against the White Sox at the end of the film. Right now, you're Serrano who proved to Tanaka that he had marbles. You remember? Jake, Serrano want to bat, right? And he hits the home run at the end of that little meaningless game that gives them the momentum that then gets them to the point that they go to the ALCS. But if you lose today, you're not the Serrano that hit the home run. It changes. The course of history changes. Serrano strikes out, right? Serrano wants to bat, but Serrano strikes out in the ALCS, and Rick Vaughn never even makes it out. So that's what you are to me when you lose, Andy. You made it. Because that's what we are at the end of the day. If I could take it back to another point of what this truly is, Paul. It's not Michael Buffer. It's Tanaka. It's the guy that tells you that you don't have any fucking marbles. And then when you hit the home run, he doesn't scoff away at you. He doesn't hate on you. He doesn't go, oh, big deal. My home runs were longer. He looks at you and he goes, right? That's what these recaps are. So if Andy hits that home run today and he becomes Pedro Serrano, then that's all good and well, but you're still a part of that too. Chip, win, circle. And if Paul does it, kudos to you, but you're still a part of that too. Chip, win, circle. So, as always, may your quarterbacks get hurt before they leave the locker room. May your running backs pull their hamstrings. And may your wide receivers get arrested for marijuana possession. Go fuck yourself.